Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, wherever you are. Welcome to the webinar series that is done by KnowledgeHut. We really appreciate your confidence and your trust on us to give the great webinars. Here I am to welcome, to give a little bit introduction about myself. I'm an SPCT and then lead the practice of Scaled Agile in KnowledgeHut. So we are a transformation company providing transformation services to several organizations. And here we are with Lieschen. So Lieschen is the RTE, release train engineer for Scaled Agile itself. So RTE job itself is tough, and then she performs the role of RTE with Scaled Agile itself. And also she is a conflict resolution specialist. And part of her major was she has master's degree in conflict resolution. So if you have any conflicts in your organization, you can always reach out to her, right? Lieschen loves working with people and then find the ways using Scaled Agile for supporting customers and then to provide the value delivery. Okay, and she has a passion for defining leading practices to deliver both value in development and as well as technical, not technical environments. So she is one of the amazing person, and she is directly in Scaled Agile, looking at the content, looking at how industry is working. So you get to learn a lot from Lieschen. So over to you, Lieschen.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so I've got a couple things that I'll share with you all at the beginning, but I'm really excited to just answer your questions today and spend as much time as we can in dialogue. Happy to answer anything related to not just Scrum Masters, but SAFe or my RTE role or conflict. I obviously love talking about resolving conflict and using it to create high-performing teams as well. So please just submit any questions or chats. I'm really excited to talk to you all. So to get us started, I just want to talk a little bit about how we support Scrum Masters with SAFe. So in SAFe, we have heard through all the research that we've done that Scrum Masters really have concerns around team, like low engagement with teams, struggle with balancing capacity, right, for maintenance and tech debt and bug fixes, right? How do we negotiate those things? That's a great point of conflict often, right? Sorry, you can see my daughter hasn't quite gone to camp yet. And then release management being a really big struggle sometimes, and generally just handling of anti-patterns, because just because we're working towards something with Agile and SAFe, right, doesn't mean that we are that thing right away. And so those anti-patterns come up, and thinking about how we can support our Scrum Masters through those, right? And the biggest quote that we see is, I need something I can facilitate with my team, right? I need that support. So we know that facilitation is absolutely critical to the success of Scrum Masters and RTEs. Especially at the team level, but obviously at the art level as well. And the transformation is only going to go well if we can succeed in that way, right? So the couple ways that we support Scrum Masters in that, obviously we have our SAFe Scrum Master course. This is the great foundation, right? It's what does that role look like within a SAFe environment, right? How do you succeed as a Scrum Master in a SAFe environment? Practice facilitating, right? Think through your scenarios and the best way to apply SAFe in your context, right? Not just what it says in the framework, but exactly how you then take what it says and apply it in your context, because your context will be unique. So the class is really important for getting that going. But then we also have our community site, which I hope you're all familiar with. But if not, I'll take you over there and actually show you what it looks like in person. But what we'll look at are these role-based homepages. So if you put your primary role as Scrum Master in the community.scaledagile.com site, then you'll have a role-based homepage, right? Things that show up on your page that are specific to you. But then also we have our SAFe art and team events and our facilitation guides. So let's take a look at what that actually looks like when we go to the community. So community.scaledagile.com. and is where you go, right? Just in case you haven't been. And there's
Hey,
all, yeah, go
have you
ahead.
started sharing your screen? I don't.
Okay, can you see it now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So yeah, the website is just up here. I'm highlighting it, community.scaledagile.com, and you'll log in. This is the same login you use to take any exams if you've taken the Scrum Master course already, and you get access to it if you once you take a course or if you're part of an organization that has those safe licenses. But the way we support Scrum Masters the most through the community, beyond right the learning tab where you take your classes, is in the implement tab. We have safe art and team events, and in here, we have worked really hard to organize tools for each of these different categories to give you those tools you need to figure out your release management, to run those events in a way that is successful and that makes you as a Scrum Master successful, and that also makes your team and your organization successful. So let's go into team events. And in here, you'll see some of my favorite assets. So we have videos that actually walk you through what it looks like to do some of these things. But then we also have quick start guides, and what I find the most useful are these facilitation guides that you can download. So when you download the facilitation guide for the specific event, the stand-up, iteration planning, whatever that may be, it walks you through all the things that you might want to consider. It gives you additional resources you can pull. It suggests format. It really tells you exactly what you need to have a successful facilitation. And this can be really helpful when you're first facilitating some of these events, but also if you've been a Scrum Master for a while, or if you've been facilitating events for your team, but you're running into these issues of my team has low engagement, or I'm struggling to get through some of these anti-patterns around these events, coming back to these facilitation guides can really help you make that transition. So as you can see, there are so many in here. And then also we have our Collaborate templates. So if you want to use Collaborate to facilitate your event, you can just go straight there, right? And it's all set up for you, everything you need to run the retrospective, several different types of retrospective so that your team can look at it from different angles, right? Because we have to do a lot of retros through a given PI. So just lots of amazing tools here that I highly recommend going through, clicking on and exploring, depending on what challenges you might be having or what you want to work with your team on. So that's sort of the crash course in how SAFe supports Scrum Master. So both through our courses, we have the SAFe Scrum Master course. We also have the Advanced Scrum Master course if you're feeling, if you've already taken the Scrum Master course. And then we have all of these tools for helping you increase team engagement, get to a high performing team, and facilitate all those events successfully. So I would love to take questions or chat with you on, doesn't have to be just about Scrum Masters and the tools, but I'm happy to talk more about those, but also about any other things that you are facing and want to work through in your SAFe implementation or otherwise. Our inspect and adapt, at the art level, at our Scrum Master team has used the toolkits that I was just showing you to all to facilitate those. And that way we've been able to do smaller groups, more specifically addressing, right, like smaller groups needs in our INAs, and then getting to those more clear features that we can actually implement to make improvements based on our INA events. So our Scrum Master team, not just the two RTEs, but all the Scrum Masters on both of our trains use that toolkit, Inspect and Adapt toolkit, to have a shared responsibility across Scrum Masters and RTEs to support the INA event. So that's another great way when I think about one of the most difficult events, right? And we've used a lot of these tools to also script out how we want to do that so that when we face typical conflict, maybe we know there's an issue that might come up. We have an aligned message for how we're going to respond, and we can move forward as a team, right, to handle those larger scale.
So, Lieschen, there is a question from Ruba Ganesh, and he says, I'm aware of Agile Scrum Master and their roles and responsibility, but not aware of SAFe. Could you walk us through about SAFe?
Sure. Yeah. So the Agile Scrum Master is in the Scrum framework, right? Is very much what the Scrum Master is in SAFe. In SAFe, we're talking about teams of teams, right? We're in Scrum and Agile, we're talking about just the single team unit. Scaled Agile is, okay, how do you take that Scrum with one team and make it work with teams of teams, right? Like a larger set of teams. So we have an Agile release train, which is what I help manage. And then all the teams underneath each have a Scrum Master working in that Scrum framework, right? Or they might have a team coach if it's a Kanban team, you know, what we might call a flow team. And the Scrum Master is not just supporting that team in Scrum, but really thinking about the cross-team coordination and dependencies, and how to scale that up. I know that's such a pun to say, right? Scaled Agile is scaling it up, but that's really what Scaled Agile is, right? We are taking Agile and scaling it to that larger framework. So we still work in sprints, right? But we also have what we call a program increment, which is probably 5 sprints, so that we can think about those dependencies and view them as a whole group, right? A team of teams or a release train, and better coordinate those. Our Scrum Masters in SAFe also help with the planning role, where we might be planning those 5 iterations together in a program increment and working through those through that coordination and all those dependencies. And then we have several events related to that. So like we were talking about, a Scrum Master in Agile runs retros, helps with the planning, but they also in SAFe would go to a Scrum of Scrums, which is where all the Scrum Masters get together a couple times a week and just double check on those dependencies and where the support's needed, and make sure that all the teams are working well together. So that's sort of in a nutshell, but the course really helps you actually walk through that, see how it applies in your specific context, and practice those things. Yeah. So it's a good addition to, if you've already, you know, if you've taken a Scrum Master course for Scrum, it's sort of a good addition to that, because it goes over what the Scrum Master is, but it talks about it more, how to be more successful in a larger organization as a Scrum Master.
Okay, great. So there's one more question. How is the role of a SAFe Scrum Master different from that of a regular Scrum Master?
Yeah, so the role of a SAFe Scrum Master is very similar to a Scrum Master in Scrum, but the big difference is the additional coordination with the other Scrum Masters. There's more responsibility for coordinating those dependencies, and that slightly, right, the planning of multiple sprints, and helping the team plan at the right level, and work across those teams. So it's not a huge difference, but what we're really seeing is a SAFe Scrum Master understands that larger picture, right? And it can take that strategy to that level of teams, and support at a higher level that leads to larger amounts of value delivery, because you're more connected, more interconnected with all of those other teams. So I consider it just like the next step for a Scrum Master. Yeah.
Okay, one more question.
When there's an SCT on the call who knows all these answers.
Okay, one more before we move forward. How SAFe course helps in growing career? What I can do next? How SAFe Scrum Master course helps in growing the career? What can I do next?
Yeah, so when I think about, we were talking about those skills, right? And the main issues that Scrum Masters face. To be a good Scrum Master, those facilitation skills are so important. And understanding how to facilitate, not just at the team level, but at the team of teams level, and understanding how to work through conflicts at those different levels to get to the desired outcomes of the organization is very, very important. The course itself, right, is going to show you, here are all the tools. Let's talk through how you can use them, right, in your context. And then as you practice and grow, you could take the advanced Scrum Master course, right, which might be closer to what an RTE might be doing, or a coach. So we see people taking different paths from that Scrum Master, right? Building those skills and proving that ability often leads to coaching roles or release train engineer roles that are more about coaching those larger groups outside of the team, coaching the system itself, right, to successful outcomes. So I would say it grows your career in the sense that, like for me personally, I actually learned how to coach product owners a lot better. And then in doing that, I ended up being a product owner for a little bit of time before coming back to being an RTE. So it's opened doors for me in not just in coaching, right, but in being able to see how I can then apply those skills in other roles as well. I found it immensely valuable having taken the Scrum Master course and been a safe Scrum Master for several years.
Take one more question, Lieschen. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Is there a minimum requirement to say that the organization needs to be managed with SAFe in terms of number of resources in the project, complexity of the project?
I have
I'll
seen
repeat the
safe.
question. Okay. Do you want me to repeat the question? All right. Is there a minimum requirement to say that the organization needs to be managed with SAFe in terms of number of resources in the project, complexity of the project?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that there's a hard number. I do think that with less than, if you've got a team of teams, right, an agile release train, that's smaller than 75 people, SAFe is a little bit harder to run because it's a smaller organization. But once you have 75 to 150 people, that's a release train. That's an agile release train. And if you have more than that, right, maybe you have 5 agile release trains, maybe like Scaled Agile, you have 2. And you can apply SAFe at any level you want, right? So if we look at the framework, we have different levels of, okay, your organization is this big, you might just need essential SAFe, right? How might you use these tools to help manage your projects to better outcomes, to increase your value delivered and your efficiency? And then as that company or that program grows, there are different levels of SAFe. Oh, okay, now I might pull these tools in from SAFe, right? Because now that it's larger, we need a different type of governance, right? We might need to pull that in. Or now that it's larger, we might need a solution train, right? Which is, there's not just teams of teams, right, to make agile release trains, but there's several agile release trains that make up a solution. And maybe we want to run those solution trains separately so that we can keep that very agile, fast delivery, right, and not get bogged down by the size of the organization. So even within a large organization, we'll see people launch an art for a particular product, right? And maybe they haven't launched arts for all their other products yet, and they start within that small group within their company, just like we see with Agile, right? A team might start Agile, they might start Scrum, and there might be working with teams that aren't doing it yet. So it's about where you're at, picking that up, and then thinking, okay, how do I make the next improvement? How do I make the next improvement? Okay, show success with Scrum, then more teams pick it up, we launch a release train. We show success with SAFe, we launch another release train. So we see a lot of that kind of practice of, again, I mean, I sound like a broken record, but SAFe has so many tools, right? what tools are right for you in this moment. And at any time in any organization, you can pull some of those safe tools to be more successful, and then just scale that up and use more and more of them as you see wider adoption and success, or even just as you add additional employees. Yeah, talking about Scrum Masters and Safe, I was thinking about some of the other tools that that we use. Maybe I could pose a question to all of you. What have you all done to increase your team's engagement in just in their processes, right, and in their collaboration? I would love to talk through some of those things with you all, or even how you manage those conflicts in your teams, right, when you're struggling with engagement or agreement. If you want to throw some questions in around that. Because I know, just thinking to my personal experience in the early days of applying SAFE, for instance, I have run into people who are very specialized in their role, and the idea of cross-functional teams makes them feel very uncomfortable, right? And I've heard quotes like, a cross-functional team feels like a race to mediocrity, right? And I think the Scrum Master, as a Scrum Master, the importance of handling those moments with grace is right? It's make or break for the success of your program. So some of the, just some of the tools that we've been building around that, thinking about how we acknowledge those sorts of statements and talk about, okay, how do we make sure that this isn't a race to mediocrity? How do we make sure that cross-functional teams actually do deliver a higher level of success for our customers, and demonstrate that a cross-functional team does not mean your specialty doesn't matter, right? How do you facilitate through that moment of your specialty absolutely matters, your expertise matters, but our ability to work quickly together and occasionally support in roles that are not our specialty, is going to make us more successful overall. And thinking about how we do that in a retrospective, right, or in a planning meeting with the different tools that we have. I don't know if anyone has any stories like that, any moments you were struggling with.
Anyone from the audience, the floor is open. Feel free to share your thoughts with us. We'd love to hear from you.
Can you talk a little bit about the specific issues of getting management's head around this? It's kind of a big ask for, especially when you're starting out small and you only want to do 1 or 2 projects, or you only want to do 1 or 2 teams to kind of, change the culture. There's a lot of pushback on management, and they're the ones in the PI planning that have to, negotiate which efforts we're going to start with and prioritize really the different kinds of things that, the teams are going to work on in the various program implements and sprint. There's, I'm sure, a common set of arguments that they have for not wanting to engage or not wanting to change the culture. Can you talk a little bit about how we could work through that, or how we can help them understand that this is going to be so much better if you just give it a real, true, genuine chance?
Yeah, so we often call that the problem of leadership buy-in. And we've been working on a lot of resources on the community site, just one pagers you can share, and that sort of thing through this process. But I often think about what's in it for them, right? I always come back to that question: what is in it for them? Because change is exhausting, right? So leaders and everyone, to stay the same is less effort than to make that change. So those staying the same are just going to feel a lot more confident, right? It's what they know, it's how they know to be successful. So when you're up against that, thinking about what's in it for that leader and then demonstrating it for them. So examples of that might be, the leader says, I don't have time to switch to this, I need all of these things done, right? Well, you can come to them and you can say, here's some data I have, right? When you give us a bunch of priorities and change those priorities regularly, we actually get less done. Here, I can show you. And then, right, using whatever system you have. And then asking them, you know, ultimately knowing that, what is your best outcome, right? Maybe your best outcome is, and they say, well, the best outcome is, right, I look good because we deliver X. And then you say, okay, let's talk about some of our ideas, right? And so instead of pushing safe or pushing like the big change, because people see the framework and they think, oh, that's huge. It's so detailed. We can't do all of that right away, right? Taking that out of the conversation and just saying, okay, so what's really important to you is that we show predictability and value delivery in this area. How might we do that together, right? How might I solve your problem? Let's try this, right? And even if you have to use different language than safe language, use the language of that manager who maybe uses a different framework or a different set of words, to slowly implement those things. I mean, eventually you do hit a place where you're going to need that larger funding, right? You're going to need a champion. But what we've seen is that when we work from that place of what's in it for that leader, eventually they just become your champion, right? They look good. Others want to look good, how you've made that leader look good. And then they might be your champion and be willing to push for the funding, right? And the hiring of coaches or the creation of a LACE. But it is not a fast road and it is not a straight line. It's definitely 2 steps forward, 1 step back in a lot of cases. And as leadership changes, that perseverance of being willing to do it with the new leader, right? is really where we see the most change happen. But it's not easy to do on your own either. I think having other people that are willing to do that effort with you so that when you're tired, they can step in and have the conversation is really valuable too.
Your corporate champion is really a key thing. If you can get to someone and explain and show and have them, you know, be willing to try it. I think the corporate culture shift is a big part of the persuasion. You know, you have to persuade.
Yeah, and it's how does that corporate shift benefit them? Why is that worth the effort? Because, you know, it is a big effort. It's going to be to create change, but we know the effort's worth it. So how do we make them feel that? Yeah. Okay, that's not a toy.
All right, excellent. Anyone else from the audience?
I will, just to add on to that a little bit more, we often find that the leaders also don't necessarily have the time or interest in taking the SAFE courses with the teams. So some of the resources on the community site are also about how to have a shorter conversation, maybe an hour-long conversation with a leader, or how to integrate those conversations into pre-existing interactions you might have with them, because you're not likely to get a 2-day course or those longer timeframes that you might with your Agile team. So I highly recommend checking those out too.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, yes, like I'll be joining in a month in an organization where they're practicing safe. So in my current organization, we don't use safes. So just I want you a few inputs. I understood the first part where you have shown the community videos and open sources available. Like what are the things as a new person entering the safe environment, what are the things I should keep in mind in addition to certificates and academic content? How different is it from the other Scrum environments which are being in practice? So some insights.
Yeah, so I would say that if you have Scrum experience but not SAFe experience, that you're going to have some good footing underneath you. It's always good to know some Agile before you go into SAFe, because SAFe is built on Agile. I mean, the similar advice that I would give anyone is do a lot of listening and asking questions as you move in, because not every SAFe implementation is the same. Even if you go to our scaledagileFramework.com and you read, all of the articles, you're still going to enter an environment that's applying it in a way that is specific to them. So I would say asking a lot of those questions of how are you applying Scrum within your SAFe implementation, right? What are your goals with SAFe, right? Asking a lot of those questions when you're first starting so that you know what strings to pull, right? Oh, okay, it's really important to you that these teams become more predictable. Okay, so now I know that I can use my Scrum experience, but then also go into SAFe and use some of those other planning tools. We have some things in SAFe about team topologies, right? Using some of those tools to then reach that goal that that organization is looking for with SAFe. So yeah, definitely start by just going in and thinking and asking them, what is it they're trying to get out of SAFe and what is their ultimate goal? Because SAFe is just how they're getting to their goal of value delivered to their customer, right? So what is their approach to that? And what is their biggest challenge? And just being open to that. I think it can be really hard going in, switching organizations as well, even just going from a Scrum organization to a SAFe one. Oh, you're doing it wrong, right? Or my other organization applied Scrum differently. And so my best advice is to try to let that go and first just try to understand how they're applying it and why they're applying it that way. And then work from where they are. Because if you're working from a place of where you think they should be, right, then you're going to live in frustration. But if you accept, okay, this is just where their implementation is, this is where we want to go, then it's much easier to take those steps and step into their space, you know, in a way that feels really helpful from the start.
Good insights. Thank you so much.
Anybody else from the audience? Do you have any doubts or any questions for us?
Yeah, I have a question. Do you have on your site the short little videos? I remember back in my Scrum class, we had a really, like 6 or 7 minute video that explained the whole process from sprint planning through, all the different half dozen steps. You can't get a manager to go to SAFe for 2 days, but you could get them to sit down for a 10 or 12 minute video that shows the whole, process and value. Do you have links like that? Or I was a little bit late joining. I don't know if you already talked about, like, what do you have, like data sheets, question lists?
Yeah, so we have some that are part of our community platform, which you get access to if you take a course, or you can just like buy member access. But we also have scaledagileFramework.com that has a lot of those initial resources as well. We have a SAFe in 5 minutes that we find is pretty helpful for at least getting leaders a little interested from the beginning. We also, let me see if I can, this is going to test my knowledge of our platform. Maybe I can share a screen real quick. So if we go to scaledagileframework.com, which is different than community.scaledagile.com, the overview page is really helpful. You can talk to leaders. This takes what is otherwise a pretty big picture with a lot of detail. The overview really offers you a way to talk to leaders of, okay, look, here's what SAFe is, right? It's a way for us to manage our portfolio, right? Align our strategy. It's a way for us to have organizational agility, right? Not just in our technical teams, but across our organization, so that we can respond quickly to opportunities or threats, right? We've all experienced having to go home for COVID, right? How do we respond quickly to those things and come out of them stronger? That's organizational agility, right? And you can talk through how we get there. We get there through continuous learning culture, right? So this page, I think, is really valuable because you could spend 5 minutes talking someone through it. You could spend hours talking someone through it. And depending on what they're willing to give you in that moment, you can really focus on, okay, well, they said their biggest problem is agile product delivery. I'm going to focus here and talk to them about how SAFe is going to solve that problem. So I really like this overview. I find it very helpful. And then there are other videos if you want to go to the resources. We have presentations and videos. We have different case studies. Some of these are, so here's the overview in 5 minutes. Why safe is a really great one, but it's a bit longer. So yeah, I highly recommend just going to scaledagileFramework.com and checking those out.
Lieschen, there's one more question. What's the role of a Scrum Master in DevOps environment?
Oh, that's a great question. So I was a Scrum Master in a DevOps environment. It is a bit more like in SAFe, we're starting to use kind of the term of a coach more, like a flow coach, because you need the skills of a Scrum Master. You need to understand the planning, right? How to do the PI planning and planning your sprints and all of that. But working with DevOps, it's a bit more flow-based, right? There's a lot of work that comes in that you know is going to come in, right? But you can't necessarily plan for it. So it's a lot more work coaching a product owner in that case, or it was in my experience, right? Of understanding those priorities, making sure that work is really well defined before it's moved through the Kanban, and really thinking about those states, right? What kind of work is waiting and why? And as a Scrum Master, thinking about how do I coach the team through that if I see the same type of work sitting in progress for too long or getting blocked by the same things, and really coaching them through that flow of work, where maybe they don't do retros as often as a Scrum team, or maybe they do them more often. Maybe they do them every time they run into a story that takes twice as long to get through the system. So it's being really flexible, working with them in that way, while also, right, as a SAFe Scrum Master, still attending those scrums of scrums, managing dependencies across teams, knowing that even though you aren't necessarily committing to a sprint the way a Scrum team is, that you can navigate achieving those overall objectives together and getting through those dependencies without causing too much context switching, right? Or changing sprints of other teams as flow comes through your team. So I find it a lot more difficult. I find it requires a lot more discipline, but it's a very rewarding thing to do to be a Scrum Master in DevOps. And managing, I definitely had to manage more conflict in that environment for that reason too, right? Because other teams don't necessarily understand how you work. You work a little differently than they do. So managing those relationships is also really important if you're a DevOps Scrum Master.
Lieschen, another question is, could you share the agile techniques widely used in cloud DevOps?
Oh, well, I mean, the basis are very similar, right? I think we have this idea that agile, that everything's different, right? That each team is unique. But I have found in applying this to DevOps, to marketing, to sales, that ultimately the basics of Scrum are the same for each of those teams. We go through that phase where the team says we're different, we don't work that way, this won't work for us, right? But ultimately it comes down to understanding your work, making it visible and writing it in a way that everybody knows what it is, right? And where to find it, making it visible on a Kanban board, knowing what your goal is, right? At the end of this 2-week sprint, we will have done X, so that you can pull the right stories at the right time to achieve X, so that a week into that 2-week sprint, you know if you're on track to do it because you can see how things are moving through the system. To me, that those basics of the Kanban board, the exit criteria, having the benefit hypothesis and acceptance criteria in your story, the basics of that, you know, we get bored with it because we feel like it's so obvious, but the truth is the basics of that work in every environment. I know people that use it at home, people that use it as like attorneys that use it, because ultimately it's about the visibility of your work, right? And understanding the flow of your work and where it gets stuck. So at its core, I would say that is absolutely really, important. And then retrospectives. Retrospectives are really good for anyone that's, I found them particularly important in DevOps, right? Because you get those surprise stories, you get those issues that you run into that maybe other teams don't have to jump in and support as quickly, right, as you do in a DevOps environment, in a cloud environment, down systems, whatever it might be, security. So the retrospectives really matter. It's how are we going to learn from this? How are we going to not place blame on one another, but figure out how to work together to get to the next thing, right? Because often you'll have well, that person pushed the button, so it's their fault, right? Or whatever it is, but using those retrospectives to create that culture of being willing to accept a failure and learn from it and then improve without just bogging yourself down with additional process or additional documentation. It's a really good skill to build. So I would say that's particularly important in that environment.
Also, how Scaled Agile is different from Agile?
Scaled Agile is just, I don't know that it's different than Agile, right? It's built on top of Agile. So if you think of, right, Agile is really about these self-contained teams that can deliver value on their own, right? That have autonomy to make decisions. It's about pushing decisions to the lowest level. Scaled Agile is just answering the questions that basic Agile doesn't, right? That the original manifesto does not answer about, okay, great, but I have 100,000 people, now what? Right? So Scaled Agile is really just saying, and filling in those gaps and answering those questions for Agile about how you do this if you have 15 teams, 100 teams, however many, to continue to have that success and to continue to have agility in your organization, no matter how large it gets, right? No matter how complex the product, right? If you're delivering, right? If you're building a rocket ship, if you're building a car, those things require so much interdependency. You can try to work out, eliminate all dependencies, like Agile suggests, right? One team that can just deliver the whole car, but we know that that's not going to be the case because there's all this different software involved. There's hardware, there's suppliers, all these things. So Scaled Agile says, well, here's how you integrate the suppliers. Here's how you integrate hardware. Here's how you're going to actually navigate all of those dependencies that we, in an ideal world, but in an ideal Agile world, we would just eliminate, right? But in the real world, we can't, right? So how do you stack those things together and still maintain agility and get where you want to go?
Quick question.
Another question. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, this is regarding the Scrum, right? When we do sprints normally we do it from Wednesday to Tuesday, right? So in normal sprints, but how that works in SAFe, because if you see the IP attrition, they give from Monday to Friday, right? So what we will do for those 2 days if that is the case? So how do we adjust that planning?
Yeah, so actually we just show those days as an example, but in SAFe, it's just like Scrum. The idea is that if you're on a release train, that your sprints are the same. So if your sprint on Wednesday and ends on Tuesday, then you want to make sure all the other teams on your release train are also starting on Wednesday and ending on Tuesday. The big thing about SAFe is about cadence and synchronization. So they don't care what day you start and end your sprint. SAFe cares that all the teams start and end on the same days so that you are synchronized in your cadence.
That I understand, but but the thing is, when you do it in a co-location, right? All the meetings and all. So weekends normally we travel, right? In the pandemic situations, we are doing it virtually. But what exactly the dates PI planning will happen in that case when we start from Wednesday?
Oh, yeah. So we have some great tools for that on the community site, example agendas and that kind of thing. We have seen people experiment with that in lots of different ways. So, yeah, so at Scaled Agile, our sprints start on Wednesdays and end on Tuesdays. But we have our innovation and planning sprint. So it's actually a 2-week sprint where we ask people not to plan work into the sprint. Maybe they're finishing work that carried over, right, from the last sprint. But ideally in the innovation and planning sprint, you have a 2-week block. So you could, right, you could go from Monday to Friday or whatever if you had to, and it would still be within that 2-week sprint. If you're running 1-week sprints, then you might want to do those longer days, right? Just do a Wednesday, Thursday planning, right? And maybe Friday is part of that too, depending on, we see 2.5 day when you add in the inspect and adapt workshop. Remotely, we are seeing people do as much as like 4 half days. So to deal with time zones, maybe running like, 4 half days in a row, maybe Tuesday through Friday. Or even Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and the following Monday or Tuesday, if you have a 2-week sprint to work with. So using the innovation and planning sprint to make that work. And we've also had times where the schedule just didn't work out and part of PI planning was into the first sprint of the PI, in which case the teams just have to plan a lower capacity for that first sprint.
Yeah, thank you.
So the next question is, I'm a project manager / Scrum Master. What should be the first safe course I should pursue?
Ooh. Okay. Well, that's tough, not knowing more about your environment. So how many teams do you have? Oh, did I lose
Hi,
you?
Anirudh. Could you tell us how many teams do you have? Yeah, Anirudh, you're on mute.
Okay, got it. So,
Yeah, yeah.
I would say we don't have much people. We have like 40 people in the tech team. So, but this is with the current organization. You may leave the company, you may move out. So that won't always be the same. But as of now, I have got 40 people in my team.
Okay. Okay, so that's a really big team. So when I hear that, right, when I hear Scrum Master, project owner, 40 people, I think the first goal is to get to two pizza teams, right? To break the,
That we already have. That we already have. We have like multiple teams.
how
We
many?
have 3-4 teams working.
And are you the only Scrum Master or you have other people in that role?
Yep, I'm the only Scrum Master.
Okay. So in that case, right, when I think about a Scrum Master who has 3 to 4 teams, at that point, I think after 2 teams, really, once you get to 3 teams, you're really becoming more of a coach, right? Because you can't show up to every single event for every team. So I think that's an opportunity to start coaching some people who are on those teams into the ability to help run either planning meetings or retros, right? Who can run, or maybe even run your stand-ups. So starting to coach people that might be a QA person or a developer who's just interested in expanding their skills, to find someone on each of those teams that you can coach to be your pair if you're working across 4 teams, right? And then as you do that, you have someone to work with to start to think, okay, what are these teams really needing? And what can we apply first to try to make these improvements, right? Knowing where you're headed is really important. So what are we trying to get out of these experiments, right? Where are we going and why? And then you can work with those people, but always being able, even if you can't get money to hire another Scrum Master, finding those people who want to build their skills and who want to support you in that, and using them as your sort of makeshift LACE, right? Lean Agile Center of Excellence, to start thinking through, how do we get to that goal? what does each of these individual teams need and how can we pair to make that happen? So I'd say that's your first step. Build that coalition and work with them to say, what is our best first step? And you could study SAFe together. Communities of practice are really wonderful then, because then you can have a meeting where you review a SAFe article or take a class together, and then you can start to use that learning to make those decisions about what your organization really needs at this moment.
Just one thing that you suggested, I'm already doing it. I do not ever attend the stand-ups. It's a team who's taking care of it, and we are doing it regularly. Similarly, there are a couple of other meetings that I've passed to the team members to take it on their own.
Great.
So I was more curious to understand, since when I'm trying to shift towards a SAFe thing, what should be the first course that I should do? I should do SAFe Agilist. I should go for SAFe Advanced Scrum Master. Because I've been doing Scrum and Agile since last 10 for 12 years now.
And which courses have you taken?
Nothing for SAFe.
Nothing for SAFe. Okay. I would start, I mean, there's quite a few different options. Leading SAFe is a 2-day class that really just gives you an idea of how SAFe is going to work overall, and gives you that introduction to how might SAFe as a big thing fit into my organization. So that's a really great 2-day class for just orienting you and really thinking about SAFe in your context. It's hard because you're both the project manager and a Scrum Master. So SAFe Scrum Master is probably the best because it introduces you to product enough that, because as a Scrum Master, you have to work with product and be able to facilitate. And I think those facilitation skills and understanding SAFe on that level is really important. So SAFe Scrum Master is probably your best bet. But we do also have a POPM class, a product owner, product manager class, that talks about more how to be that product person in the space. So those are the 3 classes I would recommend. Starting with SAFe Scrum Master could be a really good step for you, and it could show you where you need to go from there. And it'll expose you to a bunch of resources that we have on our community site in context, which is really helpful. And then once you start to look at those resources after the class, it might become really clear to you what your path is from there.
Thank you.
Lieschen, the next question is, could you please list out the roadmap if one has to become a SAFe RTE role?
Okay, a roadmap to becoming an RTE. You know, people come to RTE from different walks of life, certainly. Sometimes it's engineers, sometimes it's more of a traditional release manager or product owner. But often, I would say, like, the most common thing, right, is to become a Scrum Master, right? Take that Scrum Master course and then get in with the teams and really start facilitating and start honing your coaching and facilitation skills as much as possible. Working through those conversations we talked about, generating buy-in from leaders, get that on the ground practice generating buy-in from those leaders on the change. That's a huge part of being a release train engineer, is continuing to garner that support from your leaders. So do that as a Scrum Master, coach up, coach sideways, right? Coach the teams, do it through facilitation, but also through your daily action. And then once you've built those skills and you're starting to see that, the truth is you'll start to see you're getting invited to more program level things, right? As you are improving those skills, then take that RTE course, or even the SPC course, to be honest, right? Which is the course that makes you able to teach the classes. Because teaching the classes also, it works that other muscle, right? Teaching is a different type of facilitation, but being able to teach other people in your organization, leading SAFe and the Scrum Master course, right, will also give you that the view of an expert, right? Someone who really knows the material, and will expose you to different parts of the organization that I think will set you up really well to become an RTE. Different organizations do it differently. So sometimes Scrum Masters report to RTEs, sometimes they don't at all. So it's not necessarily like a guaranteed reporting structure or ladder to climb, but you really need those facilitation skills, training skills, and coaching skills if you want to be a successful RTE.
Okay. The next question is, given that SAFe is a framework to sustain a team of 50 to 125 people, is that to say that SAFe cannot be used with a team of 45 to 49 members?
We used SAFe at Scaled Agile when we were that size. So you absolutely can use it to coordinate those teams. If you have 40 to 45 people, then you probably have maybe 4 or 5 teams, I would guess, right? Depending on how big your teams are, maybe more. Once you have, maybe 4 teams to coordinate, you absolutely could use SAFe. We talked about the different levels of SAFe and what tools you would bring in. So if you only have 3 or 4 teams, you're not going to bring in lean portfolio management, right? You're not ready for that. But you are ready for Scrum of Scrums, right? And coordinating dependencies and planning out maybe 4 sprints at a time, 5 sprints at a time in a program increment to help with your value delivery. And then as you grow, right, or if you're part of a larger organization, maybe you grow into the next product or the next business unit, right? Maybe the marketing team starts doing it with you and now you have a 5th team. Then you can slowly grow that release train. And then of course, if you grow out of the 150 people, you just need to have a second release train. So I think it scales up or down depending on your need, but that's also why I keep saying, learn SAFe, understand it, and then think about how it applies in your context, because it's not going to apply in this textbook, do all the things way in every scenario. It's really going to be, where am I in this moment and which piece of SAFe is going to get me to where I want to go, right? So if I have 4 teams, it's probably just the cadence and synchronization. We're all on the same sprint cadence. We all have SOS twice a week together. We all plan a program increment together and manage dependencies in the same way, right? Those might just be the first pieces of SAFe that you need at a 4-team level.
So the same person has followed up with another question. What is the real importance of the innovation planning iteration to the project?
I think that the importance of innovation and planning is very big. I don't know how else to put it. So innovation and planning, we sprint and we sprint and we sprint, right? And we're always delivering value. Innovation and planning offers us several things. It offers us time to take a breath from that deliver. And without that breath, we can't get our heads above, right? We can't see the forest through the individual trees. We need the innovation and planning to take that breath and say, what do I need to learn before we start the next sprint, right? To get to that next level of value. What is the bigger picture of what I'm trying to achieve? Look back, right? And say, how well did we do getting there? This last PI, and what do I need to do? What do we need to do differently, right? And also, what do we need to continue doing that worked so well last time to get to where we need to go? If we don't take that time to think about that plan in the series of sprints, to think about those dependencies, to think about the larger picture, and to breathe, to do that, you're going to burn people out. You're going to really struggle with delivering a ton of work, but maybe not actually achieving your overall value delivery goals, right? You might become what we call a feature factory, where you're just delivering more and more features, but the customer isn't really sure what it is or how it all fits together, right? We start to run into some of those problems if we don't stop on a regular cadence to ask those questions, think about those improvements, and have that alignment and joint goal.
Could you please share some insights around how a project manager can transform into roles like Scrum Master in SAFe Agile / Scrum approach?
Sure. Yeah. So there are a lot of similarities between being a project manager and a Scrum Master. But the big transition that you need to make going from project manager to Scrum Master is how you approach the team, right? So a Scrum Master is really thinking about the process, right? Working with a product owner to prioritize what the work is, but ultimately thinking about the process and what the team needs to function really well together. So using metrics that are more focused on how did the work flow through the system? How well did we do prioritizing work so that we did the least amount of work possible to deliver the most amount of value possible? So that shift is really thinking about think about the metrics you're looking at, think about how you're looking at the work, and really focus on those facilitation skills and how you can, as a project manager, you might have made a lot of decisions and done a lot of scheduling for the team. How do you transition into facilitating the team taking ownership of that and facilitate the team in having the skills to work with you to scope that work, make those decisions, and get work through the system. So it's a lot more autonomy for the team, which can be a big, difficult step as a project manager to switch, right? And then skill-wise, really focus on your facilitation and coaching because you probably have a lot of the analytical skills that a Scrum Master needs, but you need to really develop those softer team building skills. And I can also tell you, I'm in the SAFE community chats on the community platform. So I'm always talking to people in there. You can email me, find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to continue answering questions and just support you however. And obviously the KnowledgeHut team is there too. I was going to say, again, just, SBCTs are our most knowledgeable folks. They have so much experience. So giving a webinar with an SBCT is always fun for me just because I'm wondering if, if I'm saying the right things. So please, reach out to them as well. And it was fun talking to you all.
Do we have time for one more question? Is that okay, Lieschen?
Let's do one more. Yeah.
All right. So I like the PI planning process that SAFE offers. Will I still be agile to only take the PI from SAFE for comprehensive planning without taking other things that SAFE has to offer?
Well, if you're running Scrum and you add in PI planning, right, with the cadence and synchronization, to run PI planning, you really need to define your agile release train, right? So to run a PI planning without training everybody on how to do that, you might run into some problems, right? But you're still doing SAFE at that point because you're synchronized, you've got the roles, you're running PI planning. So I think it's still safe, but I'll warn you that if you do that, you're going to run into problems, right? You're going to feel the pain of some of the issues, right? Oh, I guess I probably need to go back, right? You'll run a PI planning and then think, okay, well, I probably need to train people because they didn't really understand this. The stories weren't written well. Maybe I have to train some Scrum Masters. So certainly it's safe and you'll be starting your SAFE journey if you do that. But you will definitely run into things that want improvement. And I would say be ready and train yourself on SAFE so that you know exactly what to pull next as you run into those things, right? Do I need to start a community of practice? Do I need to run SAFE for teams with all the teams? Do I need to do a lean portfolio management training because I found out that our portfolio wasn't clear enough to run a successful PI planning, right? So just be ready to think through those challenges as they come because you will start to run into them. And I would say the other thing, we often run into those problems and then think SAFE isn't working. But SAFE isn't, this end all be all. It's about how we apply it and it's about which pieces we pull. So just remember, SAFE is a huge toolbox. And if it's not working, go back to the toolbox and think about what you should do instead or how you can change, right? We talk about inspect and adapt and retro your process, retro that PI planning and ask yourself why it's not working and what piece you can pull next. Yeah, that's my biggest advice.
All right, Lieschen, I don't see any more questions coming in, so over to you.
Yeah, just again, reach out to me with additional questions. Reach out to KnowledgeHut. They'll have probably better answers even than I will. And thank you all so much for having me. It was nice to talk to you all. Great questions.
So, Lieschen and Sriram, thank you once again for being a part of this session. And I hope that the audience were really satisfied today with the kind of interaction that we've had. One quick note to the audience: please feel free to reach out to our speakers at any given point in time with any questions or doubts that you might have. And I'm sure that yeah, we will be able to help you out in one way or another. So thank you once again. Thank you, Lieschen. Thank you, Sriram. Thank you all the audience who joined us today. Hope to see you for the next one really soon. Have a good night or a good morning. See you guys.